The grand chamber of the Galactic Senate stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal and ancient metal. Thousands of senators floated in suspension fields, each representing a species that had conquered the stars. The Valorian Empire occupied the highest tier, their silver bodies gleaming under the chamber lights. Below them, the Zethian collective clustered together, their chittering forms creating a constant background noise. At the far end, the Carthian Dominion sat in complete silence, ancient and patient as they had for millions of years. Captain Nathan Cole stepped into the center of the chamber. His blue uniform marked him as human, a species that had only recently joined the greater galaxy. Around him, conversation stopped. The Senate turned to look at him, and Nathan could feel the weight of their attention. Nathan was tall and broad-shouldered, the result of Earth's harsh gravity. His dark eyes scanned the assembly as he activated the holographic projector at his side. Images filled the space above him. They showed something wrong with reality itself. Energy waves that did not follow known physics. Matter that seemed to be unmade rather than destroyed. A darkness that moved through space with purpose and hunger. "The evidence is clear," Nathan said. His voice was steady and strong. "An extra-dimensional entity is moving through known space. It has already destroyed 3 uninhabited star systems. Within 3 months, it will reach populated worlds. Within 6 months, it will consume everything in its path." The chamber remained silent for a moment. Then a Valorian senator rose. His name was Keeper Vorn, and he had held his position for 10,000 years. His laughter began as a ripple, then grew into a roar. "This is a human problem," Vorn said, his voice dripping with amusement. "You have been in space for less than 50 years. Your understanding of cosmic events is like a child's understanding of war. You see shadows and imagine monsters." More laughter erupted. The Zethian senators clicked and chirped in their own form of mockery. Even some of the younger Carthian representatives allowed themselves small smiles. Only the eldest Carthian, a being named Observer Thel, studied Nathan with genuine interest. Nathan waited for the laughter to die. He had expected this reaction. Humanity had always been underestimated. But what they did not understand was that Nathan had brought this information anyway. Not for their approval, but because it was the right thing to do. "The data is from our deep space probes," Nathan continued. "The entity is real. The threat is real. Real. I am here to propose that the Senate form a unified defense coalition. With your combined resources, we could establish observation posts, create defensive structures, and prepare evacuation protocols for civilian populations." A Zethian senator stood. Her name was Speaker Kesh, and she had overseen the collective's expansion for 500 years. Her mandibles moved as she spoke, creating distorted sounds that the translation field converted to speech. "Humans cannot be trusted with information of this magnitude," Kesh said. "You would panic. You would create false reports. You would drag the entire galaxy into unnecessary fear. The Senate has managed threats far greater than anything your primitive instruments could detect. We have no need for your warnings." Nathan felt anger building in his chest, but he kept his face calm. "This is not about pride or history. This is about survival. I have shown you the data. I have shown you the trajectory. In 3 months, the entity will reach the outer edges of Valorian space. You will see it with your own instruments. You will have proof." Observer Thel rose from his seat. The ancient Carthian had not spoken in the chamber for 200 years. When he moved, the entire Senate fell silent, waiting for his words. "The human speaks with the voice of one who has already accepted death," Thel said slowly. "He does not come seeking approval. He comes because his people understand something we have forgotten. He comes because he cares nothing for our judgment, only for the truth. This is unusual." Keeper Vorn stood again. The Carthian grows soft in his old age. I propose we vote on the human's request. All in favor of forming a coalition with this child species to fight a threat that may not even exist? Not a single hand rose. The chamber echoed with silence. Nathan stood in the center, surrounded by beings who had the power to help and the complete refusal to do so. The motion is rejected, Vorn announced. Captain Cole, you and your delegation have 24 hours to leave Sad Space. If you do not comply, you will be arrested for attempting to spread false information and create panic. Nathan felt something shift inside him. It was not despair. It was clarity. He looked at each section of the Senate, making eye contact with as many representatives as he could. He did not argue. He did not plead. He simply nodded. "I understand," Nathan said quietly. "Thank you for your time." He turned and walked from the chamber. The doors closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid sealing shut. Dr. Lisa Hammond waited at the orbital station for Nathan's return. She had been with him for every negotiation, every attempt to convince the greater galaxy that humanity had value beyond their small corner of space. She saw Nathan's face before he said a word, and she knew what had happened. "They refused," Lisa said. "They rejected," Nathan corrected. "They refused to listen. They refused to act. They refused to acknowledge the threat exists." Nathan sat down heavily in the station's observation room. Below them, Earth rotated slowly, blue and beautiful and vulnerable. Around them, the vast darkness of space held threats that the Senate would not believe until those threats became undeniable. "What do we tell the government?" Lisa asked. Nathan turned to look at her. His eyes were cold but determined. "We tell them the truth. We tell them we are alone. And we tell them that we will not ask for help again." Within hours, Nathan was on a transmission line to Earth's Council of Nations. Every leader was present. Every nation held its breath as Nathan delivered his message. He explained the Senate's rejection. He explained the threat. He explained what it would cost. "We have three options," Nathan said. "We can accept the Senate's denial and hope the threat passes us by. We can stay and beg for their help when the danger becomes undeniable. Or we can leave. We can take everything we are, everyone we are, and depart." The silence on the line was absolute. "If we leave," Nathan continued, "we do it with purpose. We do it with unity. We do it without asking for anything from them ever again. We survive alone, or we do not survive at all." President Angela Wilson was the first to speak. Her voice was quiet but firm. "How many ships would we need?" "All of them," Nathan said. "Every vessel capable of deep space travel, military and civilian. We take the population, the knowledge, the culture. We leave nothing but empty cities." Within 6 hours, the decision was made. Humanity would depart. Not in defeat, but in defiance. Not asking permission, but taking control of their own fate. Nathan sat in his quarters aboard the Independence and wrote a final message to the Senate. When he completed it, he had it sent on all channels. Then he ordered every human ship to go dark. No communications. No transmissions. No explanations. The message was simple. We acknowledge your decision. Humanity will depart to face this threat alone. We wish you well. Humanity is now sealed from the greater galaxy. Then, without a sound, humanity simply vanished. Admiral Grace Martinez stood on the bridge of the Endeavour, watching as the fleet moved through deep space. Behind her stretched a line of ships that seemed to have no end. Military destroyers, cargo transports, civilian passenger vessels, research stations converted to mobile platforms. Thousands of ships carrying 5 billion human souls. The Exodus was the largest movement of population in human history. Every nation had contributed. Every continent had emptied. The Americas sent their military fleets and space stations. Europe contributed their scientific vessels and research teams. Asia sent manufacturing ships and resource haulers. Africa and Australia sent their people and their culture and their hope. Grace was 60 years old and had spent her entire life preparing for war. She had never imagined she would command a retreat of this magnitude. Yet as she studied the fleet movements, she understood that this was not a retreat. This was a relocation of an entire civilization. "Status report," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge. Commander David Chun stepped forward with his data tablet. David was younger, only 35, but his mind worked like a machine. He had spent the last week coordinating the forward reconnaissance teams that would scout for a location in deep space far from the Senate's territory. "All waves have departed Earth," David said. "We have approximately 8,000 ships in formation. We are experiencing minor technical issues with some of the converted civilian vessels, but nothing we cannot handle. The supply ships report full storage. We have enough resources to sustain the population for 18 months without resupply." "And the location?" Grace asked. "We are heading toward the Veil Nebula," David said. "It is 30,000 light-years from known space. The Senate's sensors cannot effectively penetrate the nebula's radiation. We can establish our settlement in the depths of it. The dust and energy will hide us completely." Grace nodded. She had seen the maps, the calculations, the probability assessments. The Veil Nebula would work. It would be harsh, it would be isolated, but it would be safe. Dr. Lisa Hammond entered the bridge. She had been spending her time in the lower levels, coordinating with the scientific teams that were cataloging and digitizing every piece of human knowledge. Every book ever written, every research paper, every genetic code, every piece of art and music and culture. Nothing would be lost. Even if Earth herself was destroyed, humanity's essence would survive. "The data transfer is complete," Lisa said. "We have successfully backed up all critical knowledge across 12 separate ships. If anything happens to the Endeavor, we still have the human archive intact." Grace appreciated Lisa's thoroughness. When this exodus had been planned, there had been debate about what to save. Some wanted to save technology above all else. Others wanted to save culture. Lisa had fought for both, and Grace had supported her. "A species without memory is not a species at all." "Have we heard anything from the Senate?" Grace asked. "Radio silence from their side," David said. "But we are receiving active scan attempts. They are trying to track us. The Valorian ships are at their maximum sensor range, attempting to follow our trajectory." "Let them follow," Grace said. "They will lose us in the asteroid fields we are about to enter. By the time they understand where we are going, we will be gone from their universe entirely." Over the next 2 weeks, something remarkable happened. The Galactic Senate, accustomed to commanding and controlling every species under their dominion, watched as humanity simply disappeared. Ships vanished one by one. Trade channels went dead. The human merchants who had been scattered across 100 stations and colonies simply stopped answering communications. The Valorians sent diplomatic requests. They asked where humanity was going, what they wanted, what terms they would accept for return. All they received was silence. The Zethian Collective sent military vessels to intercept human ships. They found nothing but empty routes and coal trails. The Carthian Dominion, watching from their ancient seats, said nothing. But Observer Thel sat in his private chambers and understood what was happening. Humanity had decided. They had chosen their path, and they would not be moved. Engineer Robert Hayes worked in the maintenance sections of the fleet, ensuring that every ship remained functional. He was 28 years old and had never met anyone more dedicated to practical solutions. When problems arose, Robert solved them. When systems failed, Robert rebuilt them, One morning, as he worked on a transport ship's propulsion system, a woman named Sarah Mitchell approached him. She had been a teacher on Earth, teaching history to children. Now she was helping to organize the human archive, selecting which historical recordings should be backed up first. "We are removing our names from the registry," Sarah said. "Everyone who chooses. If the Senate tries to identify us later, they will find blank records." Robert understood immediately. They were not just disappearing physically. They were erasing themselves from the Senate's records entirely. It was a small thing, a symbolic thing, but it carried weight. "What about the ones who want to stay?" Robert asked. "Those who stay are observers," Sarah said. "Cloaked stations in deep cover. They will watch the Senate, but they will not intervene. They will see what happens when a species rejects the only help that could save them." Robert returned to his work with a new understanding. Humanity was not just leaving. They were making a choice about what they would become. They were choosing silence not as defeat, but as power. The fleet reached the Veil Nebula after 3 weeks of travel. As they entered the radiation fields, the Senate's tracking attempts became impossible. The nebula swallowed them like a mouth closing. The Valorian ships tried to penetrate the barrier twice and failed both times. The radiation would have destroyed them. Admiral Grace Martinez stood once more on the bridge and watched her people begin their new lives. Families disembarked from passenger ships to temporary habitation domes. Scientists began unpacking instruments and research equipment. Military personnel set up defensive positions and monitoring stations. "We did it," David said quietly. "We survived the first part," Grace corrected. "Now we must build something in this darkness. We must create a civilization capable of standing alone." Lisa stood beside them, looking out at the endless expanse of nebula gas and stellar dust. "They will realize what they did," she said. "When the threat comes, they will understand." "Yes," Grace said. "But by then, they will have no one to ask for help. And we will have no obligation to provide it." But deep inside, Grace knew something different. Humanity had left, not to abandon the galaxy to its fate, but to prove something. They had walked away with dignity. And dignity, once lost by the Senate, could never be recovered. The silence continued. The ships moved deeper into the nebula. Behind them, the galaxy went about its business, unaware that it had just made the greatest mistake of its history. It had rejected the only species capable of saving it, and humanity would remember this rejection for a very long time. The darkness came without warning. Commander David Chun received the first alert from the reconnaissance probe designated Scout 7. The message was brief and terrified. A wall of energy was moving through space at impossible speeds. It was consuming everything in its path. David immediately forwarded the data to Admiral Grace Martinez. She studied the readings on her display screen and felt something cold settle in her chest. The entity that Nathan Cole had warned the Senate about was real. It was exactly as dangerous as he had predicted. And now it was coming toward the galaxy the humans had just abandoned. "How long do we have?" Grace asked. "The probe gives us 3 weeks before the entity reaches the outer edges of Valorian space," David said. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. Captain Cole was right. It is exactly on the trajectory he predicted. The next 48 hours were chaos. News of the extra-dimensional threat spread through the human fleet like wildfire. Some people panicked. Most did not. They had made the choice to leave. They had made the choice to face danger alone. Fear came with that choice, but so did a strange kind of peace. They no longer had to hope someone else would save them. They could only save themselves. Dr. Lisa Hammond was in the data center when she heard the news. She immediately began correlating the new probe data with everything they had learned about the entity's composition and behavior. The entity was not biological in any traditional sense. It was something between energy and matter, existing partially outside normal spacetime. It did not attack with weapons. It simply moved through reality and unmade everything in its path. Lisa worked for 16 hours straight, barely stopping to drink water. Her team of scientists surrounded her, offering data and analysis. When she finally stepped back from her screens, she had learned something crucial. The entity could be predicted. Its movements followed patterns based on space-time geometry and quantum field interactions. It was not random. It was following something, as if pulled by a force they did not yet understand. "We can warn them," Lisa said to Nathan Cole, who had been monitoring the situation from his quarters on the Endeavour. Nathan came to the data center immediately. He looked at Lisa's calculations, at the model she had created, at the clear evidence that the Senate was about to face extinction. "Send the warning," Nathan said simply, but Lisa hesitated. "They will think it is another lie. They will think we sent false data to justify our departure." Nathan understood her concern. The Senate had dismissed them once. Why would they believe now? "Send it anyway," Nathan said. "We do not act for their gratitude. We act because it is right." The warning was transmitted on all known Senate frequencies. It contained everything the human scientists had learned about the entity. It provided trajectory predictions. It offered analysis of the entity's nature. It was the most complete and accurate warning humanity could provide. The Senate did not believe it. Not at first. Keeper Vorn dismissed it as a trick. Speaker Kesh called it a human attempt to manipulate the collective. Only Observer Thel seemed to understand what was happening. But 3 weeks later, the entity arrived. It appeared at the edge of known space like a wave of darkness. The Valorian space stations detected it first. They sent out emergency alerts. They activated their defense systems. The weapons fired, and the entity swallowed the light without slowing down in less than an hour. 17 Valorian worlds were gone. The defense systems that had protected Valorian space for 10,000 years proved useless. The entity moved through them like a child walking through a cobweb. Millions of Valorians died in the first attack. Keeper Vorn died in the initial assault. His seat, held for 10,000 years, was consumed by the darkness. The Valorian Empire, once certain of its own immortality, discovered its fragility in a single moment. The Zethian collective fared somewhat better. They activated their hive protocols and attempted to evacuate. Thousands of ships fled before the entity could reach their core worlds. But they left many behind. Speaker Kesh ordered the sacrifice. The older, slower ships would stay and occupy the entity, while the fast ships escaped with the essential genetic material and knowledge bases. The sacrifice bought time. It cost 200 million Zessian lives. The slow ships were unmade one by one, but the hive held together. The collective survived, diminished but alive. The Carthian Dominion faced the greatest horror. They were the ancient ones, the supposedly immortal guardians of the galaxy. When the entity reached their space, they attempted everything. Their ancient weapons older than most species. Their shielding technologies that had been refined for millions of years. Their knowledge and power and understanding of reality itself. Nothing worked. The entity was not a thing that could be killed or defeated through conventional means. It was more like a law of nature asserting itself. Where it moved, reality changed. Matter became energy. Energy became radiation. Life became dust. Observer Thel sat in the deepest bunker of the Carthian Dominion and accepted his death. His last thoughts were of the human captain who had tried to warn them. Thel had been right about Nathan Cole. The human had come not seeking approval, but speaking truth. And the Carthian civilization, in its arrogance, had rejected that truth. The entity consumed 4 Carthian worlds before it was forced to slow. The Carthian shields, while ultimately ineffective, at least dispersed some of the entity's momentum. The Ancient Ones had bought their survival with the lives of billions. In the Veil Nebula, Admiral Grace Martinez watched the reports come in and felt the weight of a terrible knowledge. The Senate was facing extinction. Billions of beings were dying. Worlds were being destroyed. And humanity had the knowledge and power to help. She called a meeting of the human leadership. Nathan Cole, Lisa Hammond, David Chen, and the military council gathered in the command center. "We have a choice," Grace said. "We can remain hidden. We can survive in this nebula while the galaxy burns. We can live, knowing that we chose safety over compassion." Nathan did not speak immediately. He thought about the laughter in the Senate chamber. He thought about Keeper Vorn dismissing him like a child. He thought about the vast arrogance of beings who believed themselves invincible. Then he thought about the billions dying. Children who had done nothing wrong. Scientists and Vardists and families who had committed no crime against humanity. They would perish for the pride of their leaders. "We have weapons," Lisa said quietly. "The ones we developed to counter the entity. They work. I know they work. But if we use them, we reveal ourselves. We reveal our knowledge. We reveal our technology. We also save billions of lives," David said. Nathan stood and walked to the window overlooking the nebula. Somewhere beyond that wall of gas and radiation, reality was being unmade. Somewhere beyond that barrier, civilizations were falling. "We are humans," Nathan said. "We were rejected. We were mocked. We were dismissed. But that does not make us less than them. It makes us more than them, because they would have forgotten this moment by tomorrow. They would have rebuilt their pride and returned to their arrogance. But we remember everything. We remember the rejection. We remember the isolation. And we remember that even rejected, even dismissed, even facing destruction alone, we still have the capacity to forgive and to help." He turned to face the council. "We return," Nathan said. "We return without negotiation. We return without terms. We return as humans, and we save the galaxy that rejected us." Admiral Grace Martinez nodded slowly. "Begin combat preparations. Commander Chun, prepare the defense fleets. Dr. Hammond, prepare to coordinate with Senate scientists. We are going to war." The human fleet began its movement. For the first time, human weapons would face the extra-dimensional entity. And for the first time, the galaxy would understand what happens when you reject the one species willing to face darkness alone. The small diplomatic vessel cut through space without weapons, without shields, without any protection, except a signal that repeated endlessly on all frequencies. Commander Robert Hayes piloted the ship manually, his hands steady on the controls, despite knowing what he was flying toward. Behind him, the human fleet hung back in deep space, waiting. If Robert died, his death would mean something. It would mean humanity had tried. The signal he broadcast was simple. Humanity has returned. We offer assistance. The response came within minutes. It was not what Robert expected. The Valorian survivors did not send military vessels. They sent a desperate emergency beacon on the emergency frequency. A voice, broken and raw with emotion, came through the transmission. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself. Please identify yourself. We are under attack. Our world is burning. If you are real, if you can help, we are begging you." Robert closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the laughter in the Senate chamber. He thought about Keeper Vorn's arrogance. He thought about all the words of dismissal that had been spoken to humanity. And he thought about answering anyway. "This is the human vessel Independence 2, Robert said. "We received your distress call. We are coming to help. Stand by." The words were simple, but their meaning shattered the Valorians' resistance. The warrior species that had never asked for help, that had never needed assistance, suddenly heard those words and understood their salvation was coming from the species they had. Mock. Captain Nathan Cole stood in the observation room of the Endeavour and watched as Robert's small vessel was surrounded by wreckage and death. The Valorian homeworld was still burning. Fires covered the continents. The entity had already moved on to other targets, but the destruction it left behind was absolute. "Deploy the first wave," Nathan ordered. Human ships emerged from the Veil Nebula in perfect formation. They moved with purpose and precision. The first vessels to appear were research ships carrying supplies and medical equipment. They established position above the Valorian world and began transmitting medical protocols and relief information. Scientists worked frantically to understand Valorian biology and provide compatible aid. The Zethian Collective was next to make contact. Their surviving fleet sent out signals that mingled fear and desperation. They had heard that humanity had returned. They had received the news through desperate refugees. They did not believe it until human ships appeared alongside their evacuation convoys. Speaker Kesh, the female Zethian who had survived the initial assault, received the news in her command bunker. For a long moment, she did not respond. The humans had been rejected. The humans had been dismissed. The humans had been laughed at. And now they were coming to save the Zethian Collective. "Send them everything," Kesh commanded. "Send them all our research on the entity. Send them all our weapons data. Send them everything we have." But it was the Carthian Dominion that faced the greatest challenge. Observer Ka was dead. The other Carthian elders were scattered or consumed. The ancient civilization that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years found itself leaderless and desperate. A single Carthian elder named Keeper Mel was still alive, sealed in the deepest bunker beneath the oldest of the Carthian worlds. She had watched her entire civilization fall. She had seen her people reduced from the greatest power in the galaxy to refugees. When Nathan Cole's message reached her, she wept. "How long have we been fighting alone?" Nathan asked, speaking directly to Keeper Mel through a secured channel. "Millions of years," Mel answered, her ancient voice trembling. "We have protected this galaxy for millions of years. We have built everything. We have guided every species. And when the true test came, we were nothing. We were less than nothing." "You were not less," Nathan said. "You were simply facing something too large for any one species to face alone. You needed help. And help is coming." Engineer Robert Hayes was working 16 hours a day to coordinate the human defense effort. The weapons that humanity had developed specifically to counter the extra-dimensional entity were being deployed systematically. They did not work like traditional weapons. They did not destroy the entity. Instead, they destabilized the quantum field interactions that allowed the entity to move through normal space. The first major engagement occurred near what had been Valorian space. A human fleet of 200 vessels faced the advancing entity. The weapons fired and something incredible happened. The entity slowed. Its forward momentum decreased. The darkness that had seemed unstoppable suddenly became resistible. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was not a victory in any traditional sense. The entity did not retreat. It simply moved around the human fleet, seeking new targets. But the important thing was that it could be slowed. It could be diverted. It could be fought. Dr. Lisa Hammond coordinated with Carthian scientists through remote terminals. The Ancient Ones had knowledge that spanned millions of years. They understood cosmic forces that humans had never encountered. Working together, human and Carthian scientists began to understand the entity's true nature. "It is not an invader," Lisa explained to the assembled leadership. "It is more like a cosmic storm, a phenomenon that exists naturally in certain conditions. Our weapons do not destroy it. They prevent it from forming new connections to our spacetime. We are essentially pushing it away, forcing it to look elsewhere for the energy and matter it feeds on. How long can we sustain this? Nathan asked. Indefinitely, Lisa said. As long as our weapons keep functioning and our personnel keep fighting, we can push the entity away from populated regions. Eventually, it will move beyond our space and return to the voids where it came from. But the cost was enormous. Each engagement meant casualties. Human ships were destroyed. Valorian vessels were sacrificed to buy time. Zethian fighters flew suicide missions to protect the evacuation routes. Carthian soldiers, ancient and proud, died in the darkness protecting their homeworlds. The battles continued for weeks, then for months. The entity was slowly pushed back, inch by painful inch. Each species contributed what they could, but it was the humans who bore the greatest burden. It was human ships that led the charge. It was human crews that died in the highest numbers. It was human weapons that proved most effective and through it all. Nathan Cole remained on the Endeavor, coordinating the effort, making the decisions that meant life and death for millions. One night, he stood in his quarters and thought about the laughter in the Senate chamber. He thought about Keeper Vorn's certainty that humans were insignificant. He thought about Speaker Kesh's dismissal of human wisdom. And he thought about his decision to walk away without anger. Robert Hayes appeared on the communication screen. The entity is slowing, Robert reported. We estimate 6 more weeks of combat operations before it passes through our territory. Nathan nodded. Prepare the fleets. We finish this. And then we rebuild. The Valorians had already begun to understand. They watched humans die to save their worlds. They watched human ships charge into the darkness without hesitation. They watched a species that had been rejected still choose to help. The Zethian collective felt the same revelation. They had called humans children. They had dismissed human understanding. And now they watched as human science and human courage saved their hive. The Carthian Dominion, the Ancient Ones, the rulers of galaxies, understood that their time had passed. They had ruled through ancient power. Humans ruled through something else. They ruled through the willingness to fight for those they loved, even when those loved ones had rejected them. The battle continued. The entity was slowly driven back. And when the final engagement came, it was not just human vessels at the front. It was a coalition. Valorian ships fought alongside humans. Zethian swarms protected human flanks. Carthian weapons integrated with human targeting systems. For the first time, the galaxy fought as one unit. And in that unity, the entity lost its power. It began to dissipate. The darkness retreated. The entity that had seemed unstoppable was stopped. Not destroyed, not eliminated, but driven away. It would seek easier prey in the voids between galaxies. The known galaxy had survived, and standing at the center of that survival were the humans. The species that had been rejected. The species that had walked away. The species that had come back anyway. The Galactic Senate chamber looked nothing like it had before. The Great Hall was damaged, patched together with emergency supports. Whole sections were still under construction. Of the thousands of senators who had sat in judgment, less than half remained. Many were gone. Some were dead. Others simply could not face the shame of returning to this place. Keeper Vorn's seat was empty. Speaker Kesh sat in the Zethian section, and she wept as she watched the assembly reconvene. Keeper Mel stood in the Carthian section, her ancient body visibly tired. Her eyes hollow from the losses she had witnessed. And in the center of the chamber, Captain Nathan Cole stood before them once more. The silence was absolute. This was not the silence of dismissal. This was not the silence of contempt. This was the silence of a species facing the result of its own mistakes. Nathan did not speak immediately. He let the silence sit in the chamber. He let the senators understand the weight of what had transpired. Finally, he began to speak, and his voice carried across the massive hall with perfect clarity. 6 months ago, I stood in this chamber and warned you of danger, Nathan said. You laughed. You dismissed me. You sent me away. That was your choice. You're right. I do not come here today to remind you of that decision or to hold it against you. The past cannot be changed. He paused, letting his words settle. What can be changed is the future. What can be built is something new. When the entity came and your worlds burned, my people had a choice. We could have hidden in the nebula where we had fled. We could have watched and done nothing. We could have remembered the laughter and chosen revenge. Instead, we chose to help. We chose to save the galaxy that rejected us. Nathan looked directly at Keeper Mel. The Carthian Dominion believed themselves immortal. They learned they were fragile. The Valorian Empire believed themselves invincible. They learned they were vulnerable. The Zethian Collective believed themselves superior. They learned they were dependent on others. And humanity, the species you called children, learned that compassion is stronger than pride. He gestured toward the assembled senators. I do not come to claim victory or to demand payment. I come to propose something different. I come to propose that we never again face threats alone. I come to propose that we build something new. Keeper Mel stood slowly. She was ancient, older than most mountains. She had ruled when humans were still climbing trees. She had made decisions that shaped the destiny of billions. And now she rose to address the human captain. You honor us by returning to help when you had no obligation to do so, Mel said, her voice steady despite her age. Your people are worthy of standing as equals in this galaxy. The Carthian Dominion acknowledges this and requests that humanity be granted equal representation in the rebuilt Senate. Speaker Kesh rose next. The Zethian Collective agrees. We have seen human courage. We have witnessed human ingenuity. We have been saved by human compassion. Humanity has earned a seat in the Senate. The remaining Valorian representatives stood in agreement. It was not spoken as a proposition. It was spoken as a necessity. Humanity had proven itself through action, not words. Nathan nodded to acknowledge their words, but he did not accept immediately. Instead, he spoke again. Equality in position is not enough, Nathan said. We must also ensure that what happened never happens again. I propose that the Senate establish a unified defense coalition. Not an alliance of separate powers. A true unity where every species contributes to the defense of all. Where threats are faced together, not alone. Lisa Hammond entered the chamber carrying a document. She handed it to the oldest surviving senator, a Carthian named Witness Toon, who had lived through the worst of the entity's assault. This is the Charter of Unified Defense, Lisa explained. It was developed by human and Carthian scientists together. It establishes protocols for mutual aid. It creates a joint command structure. It ensures that no species faces extinction alone, and no threatened world must choose between survival and sacrifice. The Senate read the charter in silence. Some wept as they read it. They understood what had been lost and what might be saved by this new way of thinking. Admiral Grace Martinez was declared the first joint commander of the combined Defense Fleet. Her authority superseded individual species leaders. Below her, a council was established with representatives from every species. Commander David Chun oversaw strategic planning. Engineer Robert Hayes directed the reconstruction of destroyed worlds and the maintenance of new defensive installations. Dr. Lisa Hammond led the scientific coordination efforts. The rebuilding was slow. Worlds that had been consumed could not be restored. The Valorian population had been reduced by half. The Zethian Collective had lost 2/3 of its territories. The Carthian Dominion had seen 17 of their homeworlds destroyed. The scars would take generations to heal. The healing began. Humans worked alongside Valorians to establish new settlements. Zethians and humans jointly researched defenses against cosmic phenomena. Carthians shared their ancient knowledge with human scientists. For the first time, the galaxy was not a collection of competing powers, but a coalition of dependent species. Nathan Cole did not return to Earth. Instead, he established the first permanent human embassy in the rebuilt Senate complex. He worked alongside Keeper Mel to negotiate the details of the new government structure. He advised on military strategy. He served as a reminder to every senator that the humans had chosen compassion over revenge. Months passed. Damaged worlds were repaired. New defenses were installed. Trade routes were reopened. The galaxy began to function again. But it functioned differently. There was no longer a hierarchy based on ancient power. The Carthians were respected for their wisdom, the Valorians for their strength, the Zethians for their adaptability, and the humans were respected for something that took the other species time to understand. Humans were respected for their loyalty to those they loved, for their refusal to abandon others, for their insistence on helping even when help was not wanted, for their ability to choose compassion over self-preservation. One day, Nathan stood with Lisa Hammond in the observation deck of the Endeavor, which had become the unofficial headquarters of the Joint Command. They looked out at the repaired Senate chamber and the fleets of multiple species working together in the space around it. "They are learning," Lisa said quietly. "Yes," Nathan agreed. "They are learning what it means to be part of something larger than themselves. Do you regret?" Lisa asked. "Do you regret coming back to help them?" Nathan thought about the question. He thought about the Valorians who had mocked him. He thought about the Zethians who had dismissed him. He thought about the Carthians who had judged him unworthy. He thought about all the ways the Senate had rejected humanity. "No," he said finally, "I do not regret. Because what we did matters. It matters more than pride. It matters more than justice. What we did was prove something about what humanity is. We are the kind of species that helps even when we are hated. We are the kind of species that saves even when we are rejected. We are the kind of species that chooses to be better than the ones who hurt us." He turned to face Lisa. "That is what makes us human. Not our technology, not our strength, our humanity. And that is something the galaxy needed to understand." The fleets moved together through space, no longer seeking dominion but seeking unity. The reconstructed worlds slowly returned to life. The Senate chamber filled again with senators, many new, many humbled. And in the center of it all stood the humans, neither rulers nor servants, but partners in a new galactic civilization. The entity that had threatened to destroy everything had instead created something. It had created the conditions for the galaxy to understand itself differently. It had taken the rejection of humanity to make the galaxy understand its own fragility. It had taken human compassion to show the way forward. Years later, historians would debate what had truly changed in that moment. Some would say the entity had forced evolution. Others would say humanity had chosen to elevate the galaxy to something greater. But all would agree on one truth. On the day when the Senate laughed and humans departed without a sound, the galaxy changed forever, and it changed because humans refused to give up on beings who had given up on them. It changed because courage came from the unexpected species. It changed because a captain named Nathan Cole understood that the greatest power is not found in weapons or fleets or ancient knowledge. It is found in the simple decision to help those who reject you, to love those who do not deserve it, and to save those who have not earned salvation. The stars shone brighter in those days. The galaxy healed. And humanity, the species that the Senate had laughed at, became the species that the entire galaxy learned to trust, respect, and love.